Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism, the friendliest anarchist you will ever meet. And it's that day of the week where I answer your questions. That's right. Send your questions over using the anonymous contact form. It can be anonymous if you want it to be. The anonymous, if you want it to be, contact form at ama.fppradio.com. Just in the browser, go to ama.fppradio.com. Now, I generally, early in the week, will post a thread reminding people of the upcoming AMA, and every now and then I forget to do that, and I did this week, but I still wound up getting a couple of questions. And before I get into the questions, I want to explain why, or at least what, my, post hoc reasoning is for why I think I wound up forgetting to post the threads earlier in the week. Generally, I do it on a Monday. Well, this week on Monday, after, doing the things that I do, like regular work, and then did the podcast, and then, did some running, which I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I generally go for runs. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'm at the gym. But on Monday, I was mildly distracted preparing for Tuesday. Tuesday, I wound up taking a trip up to Derby Line, Vermont. Derby Line, you may have heard of. It's a somewhat famous place. There's a border crossing into Canada. And what makes this rather interesting is the border basically runs right through the middle of the community. And when I say community, obviously, I mean, there's Derby Line in Vermont and Stansted in Quebec, but it's one giant community, or rather, it was, and to some extent still is. The library that is shared between these two towns is on the border. The border runs through the middle of the library. There are parts of the border where they just have potted plants. And of course, on either side, there are signs warning you that it's the border. Now, the sign on the American side, warning not to cross from Canada, is much larger and has, larger words of warning. The Canadian side, there's a sign, a smaller sign, not in the middle of the road like the one coming into the U.S. Smaller words in both English and French, basically saying, hey, this is the border. This isn't where you cross. You need to go down and see the border agent guy down around the corner. Thank you very much. The sign on the American side warning people not to cross from Canada, much more strongly worded and, violation of blah, blah, blah. And so I went to Derby Line because I was approved preliminarily for a Nexus card. And you may have heard of Nexus. It's one of the several travel program things that Homeland Security offers. There's also the TSA PreCheck, which is a separate thing, but also included in Nexus. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted the benefits of TSA PreCheck because I know in the next couple of years I'm going to be doing a little bit of traveling, or at least hopefully. I do plan on attending the Libertarian Party convention in in New Orleans next July. And unless I wind up, getting together with other people from New Hampshire and driving down, I'll fly. And then there's also at some other point a couple of conventions and meetings that I know I'm going to have to travel for, and I would love to have the TSA pre-check to where I don't wind up having to go through the scanner thing and, I get to leave my shoes on, and some of the stuff can stay in my carry-on bag. And it's not such a hassle, and the line is a lot shorter, and it doesn't take anywhere near as long to go through the TSA pre-check line as it does through the regular line. And I really wanted that TSA pre-check. So when I'm looking at the prices, TSA pre-check is $85 for 5 years, or the Nexus that allows you sort of fast track into Canada is $50 for 5 years. Why would I not save $35 if I could? So I applied for the Nexus program, and after, preliminary stuff of, yep, you're who you say you are, you're not on, a no-fly list, things of that sort, come to this area. You have to schedule out an appointment, come up, and then, do a further background check and a brief interview. And by brief interview is basically, have you ever been arrested? And this is where the interesting part comes in. Aside from when I actually crossed over into the border. But the question was, have you ever been arrested? And I responded, not being a smartass, but I responded, can you explain what you mean? And he said, well, have you ever had your fingerprints taken by a police officer? And I said, well, I spent 72 hours in the county jail for not paying a fine a few years ago. And so I don't know if that counts, but, no misdemeanors, felonies. And he was like, all right, and, did some stuff. And then there was questions about, where exactly do you live? Because my driver's license that I intend to keep for as long as possible expires on my 65th birthday is from Arizona. And, I'm domiciled in New Hampshire. And he was like, can you prove? And here's some mail, and, here's this. All right. And then after a few minutes, I spoke with a nice Canadian official who was telling me all of the benefits of the Nexus program, and I got approved. So I'm approved for the Nexus program, which means I get the TSA pre-check benefits. And so before I left, I decided I'll go to Stansted. Stay tuned.
You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
So I get approved for the Nexus program and decide, you know what, I'm already here. Let me go into Stansted, Quebec, walk around for a little bit, and, maybe something across the border will be open, because the restaurant in Derby Line apparently closes after lunch. I got to Derby Line about 4:45 and was hoping, grab a bite to eat somewhere and, chill out before the 6:15 appointment with the federal officials. Well, the restaurant was closed. So, I'll at least go into the library real quick because they close at 5, take a picture of the line running through the middle of the library showing, like, here's the U.S. and here's Canada. And very small library, but, like, interesting nonetheless, like the border just running through the middle of the building. So I go through the customs checkpoint thing, just walk up and, here, just want to walk around Stansted for a little bit since I'm up here in Derby Line. And the Canadian guy's like, okay, have you ever been arrested? And I was like, well, I just got approved for the Nexus program. No, he was like, oh, yeah, they wouldn't have approved you if you had been arrested. Welcome to Canada. And so I'm just walking around and see like a water fountain sort of thing and take a picture. And, there's a pizza place. I'll go have a slice of pizza and hopefully a beer. And what do you know? There's a sign that due to an emergency, we're closed. Damn it. And so I don't see anything else that looks like it might be a restaurant, but I pull up a map on my phone, and I notice, there's a park right up the road here. And you know what? I've been sitting in a car for several hours. I'll go, walk around the park, maybe jog around the park. And so I'm walking and see the thing, the Circle des Pierres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I find the entrance into the park, and there's this giant stone structure that looks almost like Stonehenge. And I'm just fascinated by it. It was like, I've got to go see that thing. But, there's a path here, and I'll just go for a jog. So I open up my jogging, running track app that, it records how far I run and makes a little map and shows me my times, things of that sort. So go for a run. Not a very long run because I didn't know where exactly the trail went or if it looped around. And so I'm running and, you know what? There's a path that goes around the stone structure. And so I made like a big loop and then a smaller loop after cutting through. There's these sort of designs of the grass that make it, from an aerial view, look like rays of sunshine. So I cut through one of the rays of sunshine and then did another loop around the inner part of the rays of sunshine just outside of the stones, and then looked around. Just absolutely amazing structure. Like I'm fascinated by things, and the stones are set up in such a way to where the one stone faces due north, one due south. Your east, your west, your northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and then there's a stone of some sort. I don't know exactly what to call it, but it's sunken directly in the middle, and it shows you the different things. And apparently beneath that stone is the word peace written in 50 or 500 languages, some huge amount of languages. But that stone structure called the Stansted Stone Circle, absolutely amazing. I definitely want to go and, like maybe a solstice or an equinox or something and see if, like, where's the sun go on this, and maybe get a picture or two. Just, again, absolutely fascinating place. But the towns, the two towns, Stansted and Derby Line, aside from a gas station being open in Derby Line, everything was closed. It was almost like a populated ghost town. And, there's some speculation, and I would say, justifiable speculation, that, increasing the patrols of the border after 9/11 wound up killing these two towns. And all they are now is basically a tourist attraction, and not really good tourist attractions, because the restaurant isn't closed or isn't open for supper. So, show up just before 5 o'clock thinking, there's going to be a restaurant open where I can get something to eat. No, I wound up having to eat gas station food. The gas station that sold food was the thing that was open. So, that story out of the way, let me now get into the questions. The first that I'm going to tackle, Mr. Perry. I'm a bit of a procrastinator. How late can I send in a question and still get a response? Well, it depends on how much research I need to do to answer the question. If it's a philosophical question, then send it in as late as noon on Friday, noon Eastern on Friday. Possibly, if you send it by 1 o'clock, I might be able to get to it, but no guarantees there. And again, a lot of it depends on how many other questions I have, how in-depth do I need to get into answering a question or whatnot. But, there's no definite cutoff of if you have the question by this time, but a general guideline is if I have the question by noon on Friday, it will be included in the show. The next question, and this is actually a follow-up to a topic that was discussed previously. I don't remember if it was last week or 2 weeks ago. But the question is, follow-up to inanimate objects violating the non-aggression principle. Your response was no, inanimate objects cannot, and added a requirement that only sentient beings can violate the non-aggression principle. Here's the question. Say you have a pit bull on your property minding its own business, just being a dog. Something happens and the dog decides to get violent. Is the dog not in violation of the non-aggression principle? From owning dogs, they know there are consequences to their actions. So, can a dog violate the non-aggression principle or not? We'll answer the question here at Moments on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Hi, I'm Nick Hazelton from the Anarcho-Yakutalism podcast, and you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism, the friendliest anarchist you will ever meet. And before I answer the question about the dog violating the non-aggression principle, even though I've already kind of answered the question, I'll answer this clarification, if you will. But first, I want to make sure that you're clear on where you can get your hands on some gold and silver. And that would be Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. They've been helping people since 1977 buy and sell precious metals like gold and silver. And Roberts & Roberts Brokerage takes Bitcoin for precious metal purchases, and they've even permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. So call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So the question is, a follow-up to one that I answered a couple of weeks ago about whether or not inanimate objects can violate the non-aggression principle. And let me clarify what the non-aggression principle is. It's the underlying basis for libertarian philosophy. And it's very similar in a lot of ways to the golden rule, the silver rule, the platinum rule, whatever you want to call it, that is, really something taught through basically every major religion around the globe. And that is that you don't have a legitimate right to cause unjust harm to another person. And I use the term sentient being because there might wind up being, something, whether already on this planet or somewhere else, that winds up gaining, sentience to where they're acting not just purely on instinct. And the question here, the follow-up, is about dogs. If there's a dog that's just being a dog and something startles the dog and then the dog gets violent, did the dog violate the non-aggression principle? And again, my answer is no, because dogs respond purely on instinct. The question asker says, from owning dogs, they know at least that there are limited consequences for their actions. True that they can be taught that there are consequences, but again, they're acting on instinct. And why am I so adamant that dogs are acting on instinct, that they're not actually, becoming sentient? Well, let's look at an experiment that was done about 115 years ago-ish, depending on the year. I'm seeing in this article about Pavlov's dog and Pavlov's conditioning, both late 1890s and the year 1902. So about 115, maybe 125-ish years ago, depending on when this actually happened. Pavlov was a Russian physiologist, and he decided to do an experiment on dogs. And what did he learn? Well, he learned that if you ring a bell and then give dogs food, that the dog will then begin to associate ringing a bell with getting food. Whenever a dog, in Pavlov's experiment here, they hear the bell, they then begin to expect food. So they hear a bell ring, they start salivating. That's their instinct. They have learned that instinct. So just, a random dog that has not been part of this experiment is not going to respond the same way to hearing the bell as one of Pavlov's dogs that was trained, when you hear the bell, you get fed. And it's something that has become known as Pavlovian conditioning. Again, I've got an article here pulled up that I will wind up getting into a little bit. Pavlov started from the idea that there are some things that a dog does not need to learn. For example, dogs don't need to learn to salivate when they see food. This is a hardwired reflex. In behaviorist terms, this is an unconditioned response. In behaviorist terms, we write unconditioned stimulus, food, is greater than unconditioned response, salivation. Pavlov showed the existence of the unconditional response by presenting a dog with a bowl of food and then measuring the amount of salivation. However, when Pavlov discovered that any object or event which the dog learnt to associate with food, i.e., the ringing of the bell, would trigger the same response, he realized that he had made an important scientific discovery. Accordingly, he devoted the rest of his career to studying this type of learning. Pavlov knew that somehow the dogs in his lab had learned to associate food with his lab assistant. This must have been learned because at one point the dogs did not, and there came a point where they started, so their behavior changed. A change in behavior of this type must be the result of learning. And yes, again, you can teach animals to learn something, but again, they're acting on instinct. If you keep, feeding a wild bear, the wild bear will come to expect food. It doesn't mean that the wild bear is now sentient. It doesn't mean that the wild bear understands the difference between response and voluntary action.
When you hear the word lobbyist, you probably think about greedy corporations, but not all lobbyists are the same. Some are fighting for the freedoms you hold dear. Liberty Lobby LLC is doing just that in New Hampshire, working hard to represent you, not some special interest group. You can help by going to libertylobby.info, where your contribution will give us the tools we need to ensure that your voice is heard. Visit libertylobby.info today to find out more. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Coinbase has more than 1 million consumer wallets and is trusted by over 25,000 merchants, including Overstock.com, Khan Academy, Reddit, and of course, FPP. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I hope that I'm explaining myself here, and this might be one of those things to where certain libertarians want everything to be a black and white answer. At what point does sentience happen? Well, it's one of those things of you know it when you see it. And again, just because you can teach a dog to respond to you ringing a bell doesn't mean that the dog fully understands everything about being sentient or acting based on something other than just that hard wiring. And yes, again, you can, change the way the response happens in a dog, but again, the dog is acting on instinct. And again, the question here was, say there's a pit bull on your property, minding its own business, just being a dog. Something happens and the dog gets violent. Did the dog violate the non-aggression principle? Again, because the dog is acting on instinct, I'm not going to say that the dog can't be violent, that the dog can't cause unjust harm to somebody. What I'm saying is the dog does not know what the difference is between just and unjust harm. That's the difference. I know that if I'm just walking down the street and randomly punch somebody in the face, that's not a justified action. But the dog doesn't know that. Because dogs act based on what their instincts tell them to do. And again, yes, you can manipulate the way dogs respond or whatnot, but that does not make the dog sentient. And the point I was getting at is, certain people, be they libertarian, anarchist, agorist, voluntarist, what have you, they want clearly defined black and white, and there are a lot of things that are just shades of gray to where this is wrong, this is right, and there's a lot of minutia of, well, maybe in this circumstance, the person involved did not realize that, fill in the blank had happened prior. There's a lot of minutia involved in figuring out whether or not an individual person in a given set of circumstances has done something, quote unquote, wrong or in violation. Again, hopefully I answered the question. Don't forget, every Friday, I do my best to answer the ones you send in at ama.fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.